if I'm doing this, I gotta say the thing.
So we have sex, and then Pearl Harbor, and then more sex.
I did more takes of that than I'd like to admit, and it still does not sound as good as the original. What can I say? It's the best comedic timing I've ever heard. I've been holding off making this for a while for multiple reasons, one of which being I'm English and we just don't really talk about these kinds of topics. So just forgive me if I'm a bit tiptoey with the subject. I will still try and give a thorough analysis to the best of my ability. The first lyric, though hard to hear, is "Try a simulator, said the death engineer." Now most people would hear that and think, wow, that's menacing, what the hell is a death engineer? But fret not, we can kind of piece together what this means, especially with the context that it was uploaded on Valentine's Day. In French they have the phrase, I'm not even going to try and say it in French, "le petit mort." And that probably bothered some French people, but to be fair, they're French. The literal translation of this is "a little death," though it is often used as a French term for an extreme enjoyment. Satisfaction. Fine, an orgasm. Joe is not the first to liken death to an orgasm. For example, the most agreed upon interpretation of Arms Tonight by Mother Mother is that somebody is, enjoying themselves in another person's arms. We also know Joe likes being cryptic and using other languages in his work, specifically French. So the death engineer has machines that create orgasms. I think you can imagine what the death engineer is a euphemism for. And you can probably tell what he's trying to sell the male character in this scenario. This exchange causes the male character to ask, would it stimulate her any more than what's here? This introduces a female character and tells us who he is buying this toy for. The male character questions why the female character might need this since he has all the equipment to give her the desired result. However, in the next lyric we hear that he did in fact use it. Vibrating the bed became a swirling vortex. A vortex is a swirling of a liquid. I don't think I need to say any more. Then he states he is Johnny in the depths of fun and girl in Cortex. A Johnny is slang for a certain type of protection, and the brain is inside of the head. So, this is just an interesting way to say that Though the narrator of the song is through and through the male character, we begin to hear what the female character says. When this happens, Joe goes from whispering what he's saying to speaking much louder. This to me is probably symbolic of their roles in the relationship. The woman is more dominant, the male is more submissive. The girl says, I am only velveteen. I am only velveteen. And this is described as being said with a flair. Velveteen is a fabric that's like velvet, but isn't actually velvet. As well as this fact, there is a famous story called The Velveteen Rabbit, a book about a rabbit made of velveteen who wishes to be a real rabbit. The previous statement, coupled with the flair, makes me believe that this is a roleplay. What she is roleplaying exactly is revealed in the next line. Fear not any pain for which I am unprepared. At first I thought this was just a way of her saying that she's a masochist and will enjoy the pain. However, coupled with previous statements and later statements, this could be trying to tell us what they are roleplaying. They are roleplaying as if it is her first time. She's essentially saying, even if I seem like I'm in pain, just keep going, I'll be okay. This is because stereotypically, on your first time, it hurts, I guess. The next lyrics describe some activities they get up to. I'm not reading these out, but I'll explain at least one of them since the other one's pretty obvious. The phrase icicle is to do with love custard. I don't want to talk about this. And the larynx is in the throat. So you can probably put two and two together and figure out what icicle in the larynx means. The other is the most on-the-nose Joe lyric in history, so if you couldn't understand it, God bless your soul. We also hear a sound that sounds a bit different from the other beats in the song. Like a tongue into me. If you couldn't tell, this is the sound of someone getting their slap bombed, if you know what I'm saying. This just develops the sadomasochism thing from earlier. Next is come and dance she teased as if we hadn't been hit. Now you may realise I've been referring to the narrator as the male character. This is because I don't believe the song is from Joe's perspective. The song doesn't really suggest it's from his perspective, and him being on the singles cover doesn't really tell us anything either. I mean, this is the guy who likes to slap his face and name on everything. This lyric is one of the reasons why I don't believe this song is from Joe's perspective. Dancing is of course a euphemism for intercourse. The only way I can make sense of as if we hadn't been hit is by saying this song takes place during the Pearl Harbor attack. You'll see why later, I swear this isn't just random. I doubt this is another roleplay because, well, Pearl Harbor doesn't tend to be much of a turn on, and he also said as if we hadn't been hit. This to me implies it has happened at the moment, and they're just having sex anyway. So that's my best guess. Other than that, I can't make sense of it, so if you have any ideas, please tell me. Also, the fact that she's teasing the dancing to him tells me that the events that she described earlier haven't happened yet. They're like a teaser of what's to come, I guess. That leads us nicely into the next bit. Handling waste, be hard, try not to let go of it. Rolling overcomers past alternative will. Heads expecting former gratification, but still, yes please. To be honest, Joe could have said something in Spanish and it'd probably make more sense to a native English speaker, but I'm gonna explain it anyway. Presumably, the male character is trying to hold onto the female character's waist. Why he is holding on is the female character has rolled him off her. Why? Well, because the male character wants to go again. He doesn't feel totally gratified yet despite what's happened. However, it is not the lady's will to go again. She wants him to pleasure her. And though he wants to go again, he still cares for her and does as he's told. Hence the, but still, yes please. Speaking of yes please, let's talk about that. It was said earlier, but I skipped over it knowing it would be said again here. It is part of the title of the song, and is essentially giving consent. This is good, because consent is key. Stopped that they were hanging on for ninesome by gosh. This lyric has stumped me a little. A ninesome is a set of 9 people or things. There have only been 2 people who have been mentioned in this song, and for the rest of the song there are only 2 people who are mentioned, so I'm going to assume it's not people. My guess is that they did things 9 times for each other, and then they stopped. I can't make sense of it any other way. Next lyric is busker splayed all blood on 3rd Street Promenade. A busker is someone who plays music in the streets for monetary gain. Immediately I thought this must have meant that one of them was a hooker, but that doesn't make sense considering everything else in the song. So why are we mentioning buskers? Well, sometimes a male member is referred to as an instrument. So his thing is splaying blood. This is because of the whole virgin thing. They're also not physically in the street. I imagine that is just metaphorical of the location, as this song is called Weird Bed for a reason. Then it's hopping stars attributing to bunnies on 4s. This one's pretty obvious. Bunnies are known for mating, and also they hop. He's likening the way that they are moving to bunnies hopping on 4s. Next is, dreaming in reverse may well be falling up doors. In Joe's work he has used reverse to show confusion before. See The Mind Electric for an example. The mentions of dreaming and falling remind me of Alice in Wonderland, the whole story being a fantasy world taking place inside a dream. So I guess this is saying that she's banging the sense out of him during this kind of fantasy roleplay thing they're doing. Now you don't tend to fall up, but you know, in and out motion, I guess. And well, in that case, I think what the door is obvious.
Come in, my lady door.
Then we have an instrumental break, which, fun fact, became an animation meme. Something I'd like to point out that I don't really see anyone point out is there are voices during this part. Now these could just be random voices, but to me they kind of sound like the other members. They might not be, there's a high likelihood they aren't, but I'll show you what I mean. I don't know where this audio clip would have come from, so I don't know, do with that what you will. The first lyric after the instrumental break is, someone threw an apple at a grandfather guard. An apple contains a seed. A grandfather guard would stop something from entering. So this is just a creative way of saying that he finished while wearing protection. Someone cross a T is quite similar. If you cross a T, you finish the T. However, this one is probably referring to the woman instead of the man. The reason I believe this is that the next lyric is, and she should have been at least disbarred. This one's an interesting one, as to disbar someone always means to exclude them from something. I imagine this is saying she can be dismissed now as they're both satisfied and don't need to go again. Then he comes out of nowhere and says, generations squalamandered after Japan. This is obviously in reference to Pearl Harbor. Why this is buried in a bunch of ejaculation metaphors, I don't know. I considered that it could be another one, but I feel like considering Joe's respect for other tragedies, I doubt he'd just be making an ejaculation metaphor with Pearl Harbor. I imagine this is trying to just tell us when this story takes place. So in California, but either after or during the Pearl Harbor attack. I do not know why before you ask. Also, the word squalamander isn't a word, which is honestly interesting. In Through the Looking Glass, which is a sequel to Alice in Wonderland, there is a poem called Jabberwocky. It tells the story of slaying a beast, which is interesting for later, but also it is famous for just having a bunch of nonsense words. Again, the story of Alice in Wonderland takes place in a dream. Therefore, everything involved in it is fantasy. This could be an interesting nod to it. We know Joe likes Alice in Wonderland, so it would make sense. Also, fun side note, Through the Looking Glass was the book he was reading when his house guests were making ghost noises?
The pictures on the wall next to the fire seemed to be all alive. She was down on her hands and knees watching them. The chessmen table at that rate. I'd far better help you, hadn't I? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frabjous day, Calloo Calais, he chortled in his joy.
Probably has nothing to do with it, but I thought I'd mention it. So the use of the word squalamandered kind of makes reference to the whole fantasizing side of things. As for what squalamandered means is a bit confusing. To live in squalor is to live in unpleasant living conditions, and the word kind of sounds similar to gerrymandered. Gerrymandering is political manipulation of electoral district boundaries with the intent to create undue advantage for a party, group, or socioeconomic class within the constituency. So this probably just means that Japan's bombing has left generations in squalor. Then after Pearl Harbor we have more sex. He says, towns in Easter Island, Stonehenge again. Easter Island Island is an island in Chile famous for having statues of heads in it. Stoning henges is obviously making reference to Stonehenge, which is an English historical landmark. But also, stoning does mean to throw stones at something. And since Stonehenge is located in Great Britain, it's fair to note that stoning is also meant to mean removing a stone from a fruit. The stones in stone fruit contain a seed. Finally, a henge is an enclosure. The Easter Island heads contain towns which stone the henges. The head meaning another head, let's just say, the towns being most likely sperm, and Joe taking a double meaning of stoning, which is to throw a stone, but also in this case the stone is instead not an actual stone, but a seed. However, his head is closed off, hence the henge. Basically, another ejaculation metaphor. And if that wasn't obvious enough, he then says ending with an ation formed in some of the stages. The ation being ejaculation, and the stages being the other 8 times they did this. Then he says bending over forward, see the back that you made. There are 2 possible meanings that we can get from this. One of the many euphemisms for sex is making a beast with 2 backs. So he is metaphorically saying bend over forwards because we made a back. Or, we've done the deed, we don't need to do it again. The other possible meaning is it's to do with tense. Bending over forwards being the future, and the back they made being the past. Also, making reference to a phrase that calls sex a beast is interesting. This is because of the aforementioned Jabberwocky, a fantasy poem in which a beast gets slayed with a sword. This part of the song also sounds more like the mumbling at the start. We know this part of the song is after they finished, so it makes sense that this is their aftercare. This makes the next few lyrics make even more sense. He says, earning leisure interest, I confide you impress. This is basically just saying she's good in bed. Then he says, there's nothing more to say, old childlike empress. The childlike empress is a character from the Neverending Story. A story which, you guessed it, takes place in a fantasy world. Within the story, if the empress was to die, so would the magical fantasy world. Also, there's the oxymoron of child and old. In a non-fantasy world, something cannot be old and a child. But in the Neverending, the childlike empress is the oldest character. So basically this is saying that in the roleplay world that they have made, anything is really possible. And though the woman is one thing in real life, she can be something completely different in roleplay. This phrasing is also a little playful and sarcastic. This character is quite obviously not actually a virgin, hence her experience. However, if you are a virgin, you shouldn't be experienced. So he's kind of poking fun at her, saying like, oh, how'd you do that well if you're a virgin? Because, you know, she isn't actually a virgin. And I might be thinking too hard about this, but I also think the name The Neverending is quite interesting. They are presumably reliving an event that has happened previously, you know, her losing her virginity to him. And since they just recreated it, it technically never ended. Much like the childlike Empress and Fantasia, this roleplay can never end for the male character unless the female character isn't there anymore. And then finally we have Quoth Tsunami Ta. Quoth means said. Last time the narrator described something as being said, it was when the female character was speaking. So it is most likely the female character speaking. A tsunami is a gigantic wave, and ta is an English way of saying thank you. So what this lyric means is, she said thank you for the gigantic wave. That wave being a wave of pleasure. So this last part was a conversation after sex. Pillow talk. Something I know a lot about. I engage in pillow talk all the time. You're just the only one that understands me. And with that, thank you for watching my analysis of this song that was long overdue an explanation. I also hope you like the animated visuals, I'm just trying something new, you know? I'd like to thank Amazing Purple Girl for letting me steal some of her explanations. She seems to have more knowledge on this topic than me, and I can't think why. Oh, right, she has a husband of 21 years and a son, that means she must have had sex.